Hi farmers, I'm Gary from Farmers Weekly and we're here with Tinus from Farm Talk and Minister Steenhuisen. Minister, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you. It's great to be with both of you today and of course with all of those watching.
Thanks. So I think let's jump right in. What is the current status, FMD status in the country? And do you see it under control?
Well, it's certainly not under control at the moment. And we've seen an increase in spread. It's also now spread into provinces like the Western Cape and the Northern Cape. Although the outbreaks are isolated and we haven't seen the similar sort of virulent spread that we've seen in other provinces, it's obviously concerning. And that is why we've had to move quickly to quarantine and vaccinate in those particular provinces. But the epicenter remains in KwaZulu-Natal, the Free State, and the Northwest Province. Those are the real areas where the outbreaks have taken place and are spreading very, very virulently.
Yes. So what would you say are your immediate action plans?
So the immediate action plans is to vaccinate as many animals as possible, as quickly as possible. We've set a target of vaccinating 80% of the national herd by the end of this year and reducing the outbreaks by 70%, closing cases in provinces and moving us forward. So that is the immediate task. We have to vaccinate.
And is that still on track?
That is still on track. Our plans were unsettled somewhat by the fact that though we started last year, we vaccinated, we had 2 million vaccines coming into the country and those were deployed in the field. In December, our supply chain was disrupted because the Botswana Vaccine Institute had to do a mandatory factory shutdown. And South Africa's only ever imported vaccines from Botswana. And that forced us to go and look elsewhere in the world for vaccines. And we've managed to find two places that can supply now: Argentina, Biogenesis Bago, and Dolvet from Turkey. One's being brought in by Junevax, a local company. The other one's being brought in by OBP. We were receiving the first million this Saturday. From next week, we receive another 1.5 million, and then another 1.5 million at the end of February. And then from the middle of March, Biogenesis Bago can provide 3 to 5 million a month. So that will bring an end to the bottleneck that we've had in terms of the rollout of the vaccines. But I think people mustn't forget that 2 million vaccines is the largest vaccine rollout the country's ever seen. And we managed that last year. It's just in the December period when that factory shut that has led us to that particular problem. We've also now, for the first time in 14 years, sent field strain samples to the Pirbright Institute. What that means is that it's easier for international vaccine manufacturers now to match vaccines. So I expect that we will start to see more vaccines internationally coming. So that'll bring an end to that particular bottleneck. But then the next challenge is vaccinating at scale as quickly as possible.
Yes.
But on that vaccinating at scale, where are you guys planning on starting this? Because that's kind of a hot topic at the moment. Who will be the first to receive it to make sure that the damages, because like the dairy industry is really struggling. Yeah. And I think they would love to know, where are they going to be the first ones, or it's going to go to the feedlots first away?
Feedlots
and the percentages of that.
So feedlots and dairies are the first priority. Second priority is the communal areas. Those are the areas where we believe the focus has to be. Of the first million vaccines that come in now, we have developed a heat map around the country, which has broken the country up into municipal areas. And each of those municipal areas has been declared a primary, secondary, or tertiary outbreak area. And obviously what the focus will be on is to getting it into those primary areas as quickly as possible to bring it under control. So yes, in this first batch, there will be a bias towards KZN, the Free State, Limpopo, and the Northwest Province to ensure that we can start to break the back of the virus there. But it will also go, every province will get something out of this first million. And obviously then when the second and third batches start to arrive, you obviously then see how we're doing and adjust your heat map then to the outbreak and the virulence of it. So it has to be scientifically done. Otherwise, you're going to end up with the inevitable saying, oh, but why are you doing them and not us? And so you have to stick to a science-based approach. And the ministerial task team, as well as the department, have worked out this heat map now to allow us to be able to prioritize vaccines into those areas.
Sure. So let me ask you then, and I'm going to read this one. Considering the Animal Diseases Act does not explicitly state that the state must be in control of the procurement and distribution, and considering that the World Organization for Animal Health said that it does not require the state to control in terms of vaccination programs, why is the private sector not more included and involved in the rollout of vaccines and vaccination?
Well, that's not true. The Animal Health Act is specific. It is a state-led, state-controlled disease.
Yes.
The vaccines themselves also controlled substances. They're not available for somebody to just go and purchase off a shelf, because there's obviously concerns around bioterrorism and the other uses that they could be put to. They're also highly restricted substances in that they're only produced in BSL-3 laboratories, and that's for very good reason. If they break out of a laboratory, they can cause havoc. And so the private sector has been involved. We're importing the Turkish vaccine through a private sector company, JuneVax, and they will be procuring and bringing in the vaccine into the country. And I've said very clearly that if anybody's got a vaccine, they must take it to SAHPRA, do a Section 21 application, match the field strains, and they'll be able to sell it to us here in South Africa. And we're very open to that. And that's also why we've sent to the Pirbright Institute with the hope that there will be others that can then come and say, well, we can do vaccines that match this.
Yes.
Secondly, the private sector will be involved in the rollout. I mean, I've been very clear. Private veterinarians are empowered now in terms of the notice I issued under the Gazette to do vaccinations. They obviously have to register and the like. The other big issue that people have asked is, well, why can't farmers just do it themselves? The reality is it does remain a state-controlled disease. And if the ultimate goal is for us to move our status from an FMD country to an FMD-free country, we have to be able to provide the data and scientific evidence to WOHA to change our status. If you just allow a free-for-all, you're going to end up with a situation where we're not having reliable data. We're unable to distinguish whether animals have been vaccinated or not. When we do testing, we're unable to see whether they've got antibodies as a result of an outbreak or a vaccination. And so it has to remain under a coordinated state-led response, but of course, harnessing the power of the private sector, private veterinarians, and the like to assist. The other questions I always get is, well, nobody knows their animals better than farmers. And that is true. But nobody knows my children better than I do. But I couldn't walk into a pharmacy during COVID and buy vaccines to administer to my children, because it has to remain a state-controlled to keep the data flowing and to ensure that you're able to do the surveillance and monitoring. So the vaccine is just one step in the process.
Yes.
So surveillance and monitoring thereafter is fundamentally important. Otherwise, we're going to spend billions of rands of public money on vaccines, and a year down the line, we're unable to move our status with WOHA, and ultimately unable to reach FMD-free status. And that's important, because that's where the profitability in the sector lies. That's where the opportunity for our farmers lies, and that's where the expansion in the red meat sector is going to come, when we can open up markets that have been closed to us for decades and start to see real value, as we're seeing in the fruit and produce sector in other countries like China, like Japan, like Korea, like Europe. That's where the real opportunity lies for profitability in the red meat sector. And that door has been closed now for almost 15 to 20 years.
And Minister, if you want to talk about the movement of animals, and it's something that I feel is not being policed well at the moment. It's something that the breakout in the Western Cape, for me, that must be the movement of animals. I can't see that being carried on by a human on issues in this heat. What is the plans for now and in the future to make sure that the police, Metro Police, whoever is in control of that, will be able to manage this? Because I think it might be an education problem within our police force, and because this is new.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this. I mean, this has been one of the big frustrations, that you have people in the industry conducting auctions, doing speculation, moving animals, knowing full well the risks that are involved. And you're absolutely right. The outbreaks in the Western Cape can be traced back to animals that were brought in from the Northwest. We had a cattle washing operation running here in the Western Cape, where animals were being purchased cheaply from the Eastern Cape and then being brought into the Western Cape and sold onto feedlots as Western Cape animals. And that's how you had an outbreak at Sparta. As a result of one of those animals, it was brought in and sold onto them. So it's very frustrating. The second frustration is I don't have a police force in the agriculture department. You know, you watch things like Yellowstone and you see all these livestock agents running around. It must be nice. I don't have that. Nobody in my department is empowered to impound a vehicle, to pull a vehicle off the road. And so we have to rely on the SAPS, national traffic, provincial traffic, metro polices to help us. But they're also overstretched. And when you go and say, look, I need help with pulling in with this, okay, but I tell Minister Creasy that we are pulling her roadblock for drunk driving, must I tell Minister Schreiber we can no longer help him with illegal immigration raids, and you have that problem. And that is what was behind us requesting for a state of disaster. Because what that does then is it gives us an opportunity to put this on the agenda at NAT joints and to get a coordinated strategy going forward. The other frustration as well is the fact that you need to be able to have within agriculture that power. Now, the president's announced in SONA that we're going to get all these field officers and extension officers. My longer term vision is to have them declared as peace officers, which would then give them the power to be able to stop vehicles, to pull vehicles off the road and to man roadblocks. And if we have 10,000 of them around the country, as the goal is the president's announced, then we have a facility there to be able to help manage that in the longer term. I think it's also interesting to note that Europe and other parts of the world police foot and mouth disease completely on movement control. They don't vaccinate, but they have a high degree of compliance. Now, what we saw in KwaZulu-Natal, the moment I declared a disease management area, the farmers moved the animals out of the area as quickly as possible because they don't want to have the slowdown and the restrictions. They don't want to have to F-brand. And so those are the things that we are changing now, the regulations we're changing now. If we're going to do a mass vaccination program, you don't really need to do those lockdowns. You don't really need to F-brand anymore. We'll just do a tagging mechanism. So those are some of the regulatory changes that are going to follow as a result of a 180-degree policy change in fighting foot and mouth disease. For the last 30 years, we've spent our time chasing it around the country, waiting for the next outbreak. For now, we have, for the first time, a proactive strategy that will get ahead of foot and mouth disease. And I'm confident that if we stick to this plan, if farmers work with the state, if we work in partnership as the private and public sector, this will be the last major outbreak of foot and mouth disease that we have in the country, and we can start to bring stability and certainty to the red meat sector in the country.
I understand that we've gotten to this point, and the objective for us is obviously to get to foot and mouth free. But why has it taken so long for us to get to this point? And who is accountable and who was accountable that has gotten us to this point that we are in a state of crisis?
Well, let me just say this, that for the last 20 years, biosecurity in this country has been allowed to just fall by the wayside. And the biosecurity ecosystem and the players within the biosecurity ecosystem have been defunded and have ended up in difficult positions, both through acts of omission and commission. And organizations like the ARC, OBP, and others have not been able to fulfill the role that they should be taking. We also don't take biosecurity seriously as a country. If you look at other countries that have such a strong reliance on agriculture, their biosecurity begins outside their own country, beyond the border. The border is the second line of defense, and then there's a response on the inside. And that is why when I came into office, recognizing this, seeing that for the last 20 years, this has just been allowed to fall by the wayside, I've made biosecurity one of my 7 key pillars in the department. Biosecurity is everybody's responsibility as a theme because it goes beyond just the farmer. It goes to our borders, it goes to SAPS, it goes to vigilant citizens and, of course, maximum compliance. And so we're going to rebuild the ecosystem of biosecurity in the country. And that's why one of the first things I did when I got into office was restart the biosecurity hub at the University of Pretoria, because that is going to be the core of the new biosecurity strategy. And we'll see us moving to far more stringent requirements. So you can walk through the airport at OR Tambo with practically anything in your luggage. You go and try that in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, any one of the other countries. They have a very strict border control system that you don't bring plant and animal material that could pose a risk to our domestic environment. We need to be as serious as that. And it's going to take time to build up that capacity, both within the BMA and within in the department. And that is also why I've appointed, for the first time, a Chief Director of Biosecurity, and that's Dr. Emily Mogajani. And she is going to lead the charge now in terms of fixing the biosecurity infrastructure in the country. So yes, I mean, I think there's lots of people we can blame, from ministers in the past to officials in the past to directors in the past. But my reality is I can't fix that. I can't go back and fix it. I wish I had a time machine to go back and fix it. I don't. I can only come into office, see what the problem is, and then set out determinedly from there to fix what is wrong. And that is what my focus is on.
Yes.
Minister, looking at our current state in agriculture, South Africa, we're one of the few countries that do export our products that don't get any help from government. In saying that, will it be possible within the current state of emergency to help our dairy farmers that had to cull off their herd or most of their herds to get back on their feet so we don't lose that industry?
Yeah, we'll obviously have to look at that and see what we can do to help. And obviously in any type of compensation, the obvious questions we ask, well, how did it arrive on your farm? How did you get foot and mouth disease on your farm? Did you have all the right biosecurity? Did you check that animals were brought onto your farm or vehicles coming into your farm with it? So there would be questions around that. But obviously it's not in our interest to see any sector collapse in the country, whether it's wheat, whether it's sugar, whether it's the dairy sector. All of them are important stakeholders for us. And so we would be doing whatever we can to support the industry going forward. But I think the best thing that the industry can get is the stability and certainty that you start your year not wondering whether there's going to be an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, where it's going to be and how serious it's going to be. And that then gives you the certainty to plan and to go forward. But we'll obviously have to look at all of these things as we go. But right now, the priority is vaccinate as fast as possible, as many as possible, so that we can get to that magic 80% number by the end of the year.
So then let me ask, what is your response to the various organizations and their legal actions and claims saying that you're purposefully keeping control centralized?
Well, look, I mean, I'm a decentralizer by nature, and that's certainly my party philosophy. But there are some things that have to remain in the control of the state. Not everything can be devolved. Not everything can be privatized. Not every response suits individuals just having the right to do what they want. You do need to have a modicum of control here, particularly when you're dealing with restricted vaccines, and secondly, ensuring that we have the monitoring, surveillance, and controls to ensure that we're getting the benefit of that, and also watching the effect of these vaccines on animals. Are we breaking the back of the virus and the like? We've seen what happens when you allow a free-for-all. In KZN, some farmers have thought it's a very good idea to import vaccines from Kenya illegally. What they've done is introduced new strains of the disease, which we've never had here before. And so that is why there does need to be some element of state control in this thing. Now, I hear some of these critics, but then I look at what was there in the past and I look at what we've done. For the first time ever, under this ministry, we brought together the entire industry, private sector, public sector, academics, scientists, farming organizations, around the same table to discuss FMD. Arising from that, for the first time ever, a ministerial task team that had 50% private sector, 50% government. They then came up with the strategy that presented us with three options and advised on the vaccination model that Argentina and Brazil had followed, given the similar circumstances that they have with communal herds and commercial herds, and then formed an implementation committee that's made up entirely of the Milk Producers Organization, Red Meat Producers Organization, Red Meat Industry Services, South African Pork Organization, the Agri-SA, TLU, and AFASA to be able to communicate news to the farm. There's never been a situation where there's been more accessibility for the private sector. Last year, we allowed private sector organizations to purchase vaccines for the very first time. That's never been allowed before. They were able to purchase vaccines for rollout in their industries. And for the very first time, we've allowed private people to import vaccines under JuneVax. So I reject completely this notion that, there's this big state, desire to control everything. Where it is appropriate to roll out and to devolve, it is being done. Where it is required for the state to manage and direct, we have to do that. That is a responsibility that we have.
We saw Design Biologics saying they lost the right to import the moment state got involved. And stories like that makes everybody confused, and everybody just starts a lot of speculations. What is the real story?
I mean, I don't know where the story began, and it's not the Minister of Agriculture's job to get involved in commercial relationships between a local agent and the international supplier. I had one meeting with Biogenesis Bago, which took place in Cape Town, hosted by the Argentinian ambassador who had brought them here. There were a number of people in that meeting who can attest to the fact that we discussed the serotypes, we discussed the virology, we discussed their experience and the efficacy of their vaccine, and a very generous offer from them to help us with the rollout of the vaccine. At no stage during that meeting did I say anything about Design Biologics, because it doesn't concern me. Just as who imports the Dolvet vaccine doesn't concern me. My concern is getting as many vaccines into the country as possible, as quickly as possible. And whether it's JuneVax, Design Biologics, whoever can get their vaccines matched with SAHPRA, do the Section 21 emergency procurement, we will take those vaccines. And the field is open for whoever can do it. That's also why we sent our samples to Pirbright, to allow them to be able to match different vaccines around the country. I've got no interest in the commercial relationship between a local agent and when I go and buy a car from a local dealership, I don't then phone the company in Germany and say, no, I don't want to buy the car from them. I want to buy it from you directly. You deal with the franchise and the local agent. And I'm very happy to do that. In this case, there's obviously a commercial issue that occurred between them. It's got nothing to do with me. I said nothing about Design Biologics. I was very happy to work with them as a local agent. It was obviously a commercial decision that was taken by Biogenesis Bago, and they must answer for what was behind their decision. What I suspect happened is that they saw when they came here that there was a capacity at OBP, and obviously thought, well, why don't we just deal directly? But that's their decision. It's got nothing to do with the Minister of Agriculture. I don't get involved in those types of decisions for very good reason. I mean, there's already issues around procurement and procurement regulation. I don't want to get involved in that. I want to get involved in a lake of vaccines that I can then send out into the field as quickly and effectively as possible. And if you've got a vaccine, please take it to SAHPRA, get it registered, and we will purchase it.
So then let me ask, where do you think government has fallen short in handling this crisis, and what measurable steps are being implemented to prevent a similar crisis? So not just foot and mouth, but let's say African swine fever, which is currently a challenge as well. What measurable changes are being implemented to prevent something so escalating?
So that's why we've appointed Dr. Mulvajani as head of biosecurity, because you're absolutely right. I mean, this is not isolated issue. There's also plant pests that are a risk as well. That fall armyworm, all of these things. Bunchy top disease for bananas. And we have to build up this ecosystem now to protect us from that going forward. And that is why biosecurity is now one of the 7 key pillars of what we're going to do. Appointed a director of biosecurity. We're going to look at the biosecurity infrastructure in the country and come up with a new model that's going to protect our borders and protect the agricultural sector going forward. Where did we fall short? I think some of the communication could have been better. And And that is certainly something that we're addressing. I find that within government comms, we're sometimes too slow to communicate. How are we remedying that? Well, we've set up now a website and invite people to go and see it. It sets up very clearly where the latest outbreaks are, what the numbers are. It sets out symptoms. It's got an information page. It's got the latest press releases. And it has got a toll-free number as well where people can phone for advice and what to do and how to contact state veterinarians, etc. And we hope that that's going to fill the gap. Because what I have noticed is that when government fails to communicate effectively, that gap is filled by fake news and opportunists who then step in and get people whipped up into panic with fake information. The vaccine is going to cost 300 Rand a dose. And you get people all up in arms about that. The government's not doing anything to procure the vaccine. I can assure you, it has been the last thing I think about at night when I go to sleep and the first thing every morning. And I think I've shown my commitment to fighting this thing. I've given up my political leadership of my organization to focus full-time on this because it requires a full-time general at the head of the campaign. And I don't think it would have been fair to launch this new policy and campaign and then spend the critical time, which we're going into now, which is the mass rollout, campaigning for an internal position in my party. I've accepted I have a responsibility as the Minister of Agriculture to step in and rescue the situation. And I'm dedicating virtually every single day of my life now to dealing with foot and mouth, which is not bad for somebody who a year and a half ago thought foot and mouth disease was something that politicians got, not cows.
So let me ask you, Minister, if there's one last message that you have to our audience and the agricultural audience in general, what would it be?
Well, my message is very clear. Please work with us, partner with us. There's no use us sitting on opposite sides of the spectrum throwing stones at each other. We're in a crisis. Yes, there's things that need to change. There's laws that need to change. There's regulations that need to change. And we will do those. But right now, we have to work together. Focus on biosecurity on the farms, report, work with government, and we will get through this. And we will emerge from it stronger than we've ever been before. And I want to give the undertaking that I care deeply about each and every stakeholder in this industry. Our stakeholders are the vital part of our mission in agriculture. We don't have a Department of Agriculture without farmers. I don't farm. The department doesn't farm. We need our farmers. They are the people that contribute to the jobs, to the growing economy and the like. And I want to assure them they've got a minister that is on their side and who's working day in and day out to get through this crisis while also juggling a whole lot of other crises in the sugar sector and the wheat sector and various other parts of the agricultural chain, trying to deal with ports that are throttling our fruit exports, trying to deal with road and rail that needs to be improved, trying to deal with things like rural safety that are so important for our farmers and farm workers around the country. So it's not just a one-dimensional thing. You've got to deal with all of these things in real time. And I promise you, I'm doing the very best I can with what I have in my hands to be able to deal with this crisis. And I promise you we're going to get through this. And I promise you this will be the last major outbreak of foot and mouth disease that we have in the country if we work together to break the back of this current outbreak and then stick to the plan that's going to and pathway that's going to take us to becoming FMD free. And then the world is going to be open to our markets. And we know we've got the best red meat products in the world. And those markets will find very willing recipients in places. And then we can start to see the profitability, the certainty, and the growth and expansion in the red meat sector in the country. And I think that's going to offer more opportunities for many more farmers and many more people to really make a good living and good profits out of the work that they're doing.
Good, great. So thank you, farmers. Until next time, goodbye.